in the very beginning, you didn't describe the thought process. So basically just, some of the other, is they kind of went into, okay, we were thinking about this and that, led us to this, particular question or these particular variables that we're interested in. So, just describing how did you get to the research question. After that, then you would define them, which you jumped straight into, and you did that very well. So you guys, Jack did a good job defining those.
Yeah.
The articles were well explained, and you had 3 of them, and he had the right level of information. And so he had the right scope. He was explaining enough of the method and the participants and the result that it wasn't too detailed and it wasn't not detailed enough. The only problem was in that last one with the 2 articles. He had the information on the slides, but he didn't talk about it. So what I would wanted him to do was explain how those brain areas were related to empathy, and then connect that to
Awesome.
to yours, the rationale. So then you gave the hypotheses, but then you didn't, and you gave the 2, but you didn't explain how you got to those hypotheses. Why do we think those 2 might?
Why they're applicable why it's applicable to our research question.
Well, no. So you say, our first hypothesis is that an increase in childhood hardship might produce an increase in empathy because that's what was missing.
Okay.
And the because we've talked about, and you guys know it, maybe childhood hardship allows you to kind of get into other people's shoes. You've experienced hardships, and now you can understand other people's hardships, so empathy goes up. Our other hypothesis was that as childhood hardship goes up, empathy goes down. Maybe if you experience too much trouble, it's hard for you to empathize with someone else because my life sucks and it's hard. Why are you complaining about this? Just suck it up. That type of thing. So the because was missing. You didn't explain how you got random selection. And if you did not do that, then you can either pretend, I won't know.
No, we had it. So, well, I know I had one for me. And
but you would want to explain how that produces random selection. So some groups would say we asked firefighters and got a random selection, then they move on. Well, it's how did you get a random selection? You're just saying
every third firefighter who came down the pole, or
sure, yes, that would work. Yes.
Is it random selection just the fact that somebody's willing and available to take it, just taking willing parties?
So there we get into a very sticky, logical conundrum in surveys. We can't force people to take it. So technically everything is kind of voluntary, yeah, and that's a problem. That's the response rate bias. But that's something that's inherent into surveys that we can't really control. But we can control whether we're going, that person looks nice, or I want to talk to her and giving her one.
I walked up to the grumpy ones too, they just said no.
Yeah, versus it's the third person. Oh my gosh, they look a little scary. I'm not sure I want to give it to them, but you have to because it's the third person. That's the idea. So unconscious bias from self-selection versus random.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about those. This one. Explaining, so here you gave the means and the standard deviation. You said what they were. You even mentioned, I think, what neutral was, but we want to talk about what those numbers indicate. So what I was looking is for you to say our empathy was really high. I mean, we were measuring it out of 5 or whatever it was, 6, and our average was 4.5. That's way above neutral. And here's our standard deviation. That means everyone was basically empathetic with very little variation.
And I said that, I just didn't use the numbers.
And it was said later, exactly, in the discussion and stuff. Standard deviation, discussing that, things were very clustered together versus more spread out.
Sure.
And then the discussion was good, and it's because we had talked about things in the discussion that we would want to bring up, so you can add this stuff that I kind of talked about here. So maybe the questions that you were asking about trauma are not the types of trauma that actually produce changes in empathy, because you had variation in trauma, but you just didn't see any of that correspond to changes in empathy. So you could look at, well, maybe white, high educated, high wage individuals don't experience the trauma we're talking about that affects trauma, potentially. In which case, maybe if you gave this survey somewhere else, you might find that relationship. And then here, you know, as we talked about, good, high empathy. Oh.
Like literally saying that, like, I didn't literally say that.
Yeah.
Is part of what was missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It was more inferred.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you mentioned these things as a part of the sample, but then you want to connect it to how that might produce, you know, the issues that we're talking about, the critiques.
Yeah.
And then this one, you know, maybe the reason why empathy is so high is because people that are empathetic decide to take our survey, and everyone who is not empathetic was like, no, I don't want to. Okay, well then how would we address that?
Okay.
Because you mentioned that, but then what might a future study do? What might a future study do here?
Yeah, a future study. Well, you go to a different place
Mhm.
where there's more variety in race. There's
Mhm.
more variety in people's earnings.
Yes.
And there's more variety in their education
Yes.
level.
Yep. And you could look at your questions and say, well, you know, are the questions we asked, are they missing a type of trauma that maybe actually affects empathy?
Yeah, and we couldn't
Yeah.
use those because of the parameters of,
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you had also
Future studies would want to be able to ask these questions.
yeah.
Yeah, you were also saying something at the end about the type of trauma. It was
Yeah.
more about the type of trauma that was like interesting. I forget what
It was whether or not one person's trauma is another person's trauma. So like a bunch of
Exactly.
wealthy white kids growing up in Santa Cruz who have never
Uh-huh.
really seen what severe hardship,
Yeah.
horrific hardship can look like, are saying, oh yeah, I've had trauma, you know, my dad smacked me one time
Yeah.
because X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And everybody else in, you know,
Exactly.
is
Yeah,
going, hey.
that was
That's
a
it.
good. That was a good point.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. All right.
Cool.
All right. Cool.
Good job. I mean, that's an